The sound of his palm meeting my face echoed through our Denver townhouse. Mark stood over me, hands still trembling. Pack your bags, move in with my mother. She'll straighten you out. I'm sorry, not let's talk. She'll straighten you out. As if I were broken. As if Linda Reynolds, his puppet master mother, was the mechanic who could fix me. But Mark didn't know I'd already found the files. The Las Vegas loans, the wire transfers from Linda's accounts, the stack of overdraft notices about to collapse. And he definitely didn't know I'd already called my lawyer about the $800,000 prenup. Because if Linda taught Mark how to trap me, she accidentally taught me how to destroy them both. Before we continue, kindly comment the city where you are watching from, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story like this. Now, let's continue. I stood in the center of our living room, my cheek burning where his hand had been. The silence felt heavier than the slap itself. Mark had never touched me like that before. He'd yelled, he'd punished me with silence. But this was new. He paced near the fireplace, running his fingers through his hair. His breathing was sharp, controlled, like he was following a script he'd memorized years ago. You embarrassed me, Emily. I hadn't. I'd forgotten to RSVP to one of his charity galas. That was it. A digital form. An oversight during a busy week at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. But to Mark, it was treason. I'm sorry, I whispered. My voice felt small, childlike. He turned to face me, and for a second, I thought I saw regret. But then his jaw tightened, his mother's jaw. The same expression Linda wore when she corrected waitstaff or lectured cashiers. Pack your bags, he said flatly. You're moving in with my mother. She'll straighten you out. The words landed like stones. Not let's work on this, not I lost control. She'll straighten you out. I blinked, trying to process what he'd just said. You're sending me to your mother? Linda knows how to handle situations like this. He adjusted his cufflinks, checked his watch. You'll stay there until you understand how a wife is supposed to behave. A wife is supposed to behave. I'd heard that phrase before. From Linda. At Thanksgiving, dinners, in Colorado Springs. At birthday brunches where she'd correct the way I cut Mark's steak or folded his napkins. She had an entire system, rules for everything. And Mark absorbed every word like gospel. This is insane, I said, my voice finally finding some strength. I'm not a child, Mark. Then stop acting like one. He grabbed his coat and keys, didn't look back. The door slammed behind him, rattling the picture frames on the wall. Our wedding photo tilted slightly. I stared at it. That version of me looked so hopeful. So stupid. I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling, but I didn't cry. I refused to give him that. Instead, I thought about the prenup. $800,000. That's what Mark's family attorney had insisted I sign 3 weeks before our wedding. Just a formality, Linda had said, smiling over champagne. Protects both of you. At the time, I didn't care. I was in love. I thought Mark was different from the corporate sharks he worked with in downtown Denver. I thought he respected me. I was wrong. And now, sitting alone in our townhouse with my cheek still stinging, I started to see the pattern. The phone calls Mark took in the other room, the way Linda showed up unannounced, always watching, always correcting. The block number that had been calling my cell for 2 weeks, whispering warnings I didn't understand. Ask your husband why his mother's accounts are being emptied. I'd hung up every time. Thought it was a scam. A prank. But now staring at that tilted wedding photo, I realized something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't Mark's temper. This wasn't a bad night or an isolated mistake. This was Linda's training, her system, her control. And if she trained Mark to treat me this way, What else had she trained him to do? I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, walked to Mark's home office. The door was closed. It was always closed. I turned the handle. It wasn't locked. The first time I met Linda Reynolds was 3 years ago in Colorado Springs, at her sprawling ranch-style home overlooking Pikes Peak. Mark had been nervous the entire drive. His hands gripped the steering wheel too tight. He kept reminding me of small things. Don't talk about politics. Don't mention your student loans. And whatever you do, let her speak first. I thought he was exaggerating. Mothers could be particular. I understood that. But Linda wasn't particular. She was calculating. She greeted us at the door in a cream pantsuit, her silver hair perfectly styled. Her smile was warm, but her eyes moved over me like a home inspector checking for structural damage. "Emily," she said, taking both my hands. "Mark has told me so much about you." Her grip was firm, cold. She held on just a second too long. Inside, her home smelled like lavender and furniture polish. Everything was pristine, the kind of clean that felt aggressive. Mark immediately straightened his posture, smoothed his shirt. I watched him transform into a different version of himself. "Shoes off at the door, dear," Linda said sweetly. "House rule." I slipped off my flats and followed her into the living room. She'd prepared tea, expensive china, cloth napkins folded into perfect triangles. "So, Emily," Linda poured the tea with practiced elegance. "Mark tells me you're a nurse. How noble." The pause before noble felt intentional, like she'd wanted to say something else. "I love it," I said, accepting the cup. "Helping people gives me purpose." Linda stirred her tea slowly. Mark's father was a surgeon, real medicine, life and death decisions. She smiled at me over the rim of her cup. "But nursing is important too, of course." Mark said nothing. He sat beside his mother, nodding along like a student in her classroom. The afternoon stretched into a master class in subtle humiliation. Linda corrected the way I held my fork, suggested I might want to freshen up my appearance before meeting Mark's colleagues, asked if I understood how important it was to support a man's ambitions without overshadowing them. "A good wife," she said, refilling my tea, "knows when to speak and when to simply be present." Mark repeated it later that night in the car, word for word. "A good wife knows when to be present." I laughed it off, thought it was just nerves, just a mother protective of her son. But the pattern continued. 2 months before our wedding, Linda gave me a book, The Surrendered Wife. She'd highlighted passages in pink. "This helped me with Mark's father," she said. "You'll find it useful." She showed me how Mark liked his dress shirts folded, crisp military corners, sleeves aligned perfectly. "He'll notice if it's wrong," she warned. She critiqued my cooking, my posture, the way I laughed too loud at dinner parties. And Mark absorbed every correction, every rule, every expectation. He wasn't doing this on his own. He was echoing her, becoming her. A mother raising her son to dominate, a son learning to control. I used to think Linda was old-fashioned, traditional, maybe even misguided, but well-meaning. Now, standing in Mark's office 4 years later, I understood the truth. Linda hadn't just influenced Mark, she'd designed him, programmed him, and I was the test subject for her creation. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I'd been getting these calls for 2 weeks, always blocked, always cryptic. I answered, a man's voice, low, urgent. "Ask your husband why his mother's accounts are being emptied." "Who is this?" I whispered. "Someone who knows what they're hiding. Check his office. Tonight." The line went dead. I stood there, phone trembling in my hand, staring at Mark's locked filing cabinet. "Somewhere in this room," was the answer. The reason Linda had been so desperate to control me, The reason Mark had been trained to keep me compliant. I wasn't a wife. I was a witness they needed to silence. Mark's office smelled like leather and expensive cologne. I'd only been inside a handful of times, always with permission, always supervised. He called it his sanctuary, the place where he handled serious business. Now I understood why he guarded it so carefully. The filing cabinet stood against the far wall, brushed steel and locked tight. But the desk was a different story, papers scattered across the surface. Mark had left in a hurry, angry, careless. I pulled open the top drawer, insurance documents, tax forms from last year, nothing unusual. The second drawer held office supplies and old business cards from conferences in Las Vegas and Reno. Las Vegas. That word kept appearing. The bottom drawer stuck. I yanked harder and it finally gave way. Inside was the accordion folder, thick, bursting with papers. My hands shook as I pulled it out and sat on the floor. Opened it. Bank statements. Dozens of them. But not from our joint account in Denver. These were from institutions I didn't recognize. Desert Plains Credit Union, Sierra Vista Bank, all with Nevada addresses. I scanned the first statement. Mark's name, Linda's name, joint account holders. The balance made my stomach drop. Negative $73,000. I flipped to the next page. Another account. Negative $49,000. Another. Negative $62,000. Every single account was underwater, drowning in overdraft fees and penalty charges. What did you do? I whispered to the empty room. I kept digging. Found loan documents. Personal loans with interest rates that made my nursing salary look like pocket change. 26% APR, 31%, some from legitimate banks, others from companies with names like Quick Capital Solutions and Silver State Lending Group, all co-signed by Linda Reynolds, all listing Mark Reynolds as primary borrower, all in default. Then I found the wire transfer records, printed emails between Mark and someone named D. Castellano. The subject lines were vague. Payment plan. Extension request. Final notice. I opened one email dated 3 weeks ago. Mark, your mother's property in Colorado Springs won't cover what you owe. We need the full amount by end of month, or we move to collection. You understand what that means. DC. My breath caught. Linda's property. They were betting Linda's house, the same house where she'd served me tea and taught me how to be a good wife, the same house she'd lived in for 30 years. I kept reading, found another email, this one from Linda to Mark. Stop panicking. Emily doesn't know anything. That's why we made her sign the prenup. If things go south, her assets are protected, which means your creditors can't touch her. She's our firewall. Stay calm. Mom. I read it again and again. She's our firewall, not our daughter-in-law, not the woman you love. Our firewall, our legal buffer. A human shield between their debt and their consequences. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. Every holiday dinner, every corrected napkin fold, every lecture about being a supportive wife. It wasn't about tradition. It wasn't about control. It was about keeping me ignorant, compliant, legally useful. Linda wasn't training me to serve Mark. She was training me to protect him, and I'd played my part perfectly. I pulled out my phone, took pictures of every document, every email, every bank statement showing the empire Linda and Mark had built, and the catastrophic collapse they were hiding. The block number had been right. Someone knew. Someone was watching. I was about to close the folder when I saw one more document, a business card clipped to the back, Castellano Recovery Services, Las Vegas, NV, and written in pen across the bottom, Denver. Address. Confirmed. Monitoring. My blood went cold. They weren't just in debt, they were being hunted, and whoever was hunting them knew exactly where we lived. I stood up, shoving the folder back into the drawer. My heart hammered against my ribs. That's when I heard it. the low rumble of an engine outside, idling, not passing by, staying. I moved to the window and pulled the curtain back just an inch. A black SUV sat across the street, Nevada plates, tinted windows, and behind the wheel, a man in sunglasses stared directly at our townhouse, directly at me. I drove to Colorado Springs the next morning with my phone recording in my jacket pocket. Mark hadn't come home, hadn't called. He was doing what he always did when things got difficult, running to his mother. Fine. Let them think I was broken. Let them think I was coming to submit. Linda's house looked exactly the same. Perfectly landscaped, American flag on the porch, the kind of home that screamed stability and traditional values, all of it a lie. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been watching through the window. Waiting. Emily. Her smile was practiced, warm on the surface. I'm so glad you came to your senses. I forced myself to look down, play the part. Mark said I should stay here for a while. He did. Linda stepped aside, gesturing me in. And he was right to send you. Come, let's talk. The house still smelled like lavender, but now it felt suffocating. Every perfect throw pillow, every spotless countertop, a museum of control. Linda led me to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of iced tea, sweet tea, the southern kind, even though we were in Colorado. She'd grown up in Georgia and brought her traditions with her like weapons. You embarrassed my son, she said, sliding a glass toward me. Not a question, a fact. I forgot to RSVP to an event, that's all. That's all? Linda's eyebrows lifted. Emily, a wife's job is to make her husband's life easier, not harder. When you fail at simple tasks, it reflects on him, on his reputation, on our family, as if I were a belonging, an asset on a balance sheet. I understand, I said quietly. Linda leaned back in her chair, studying me. Her eyes moved over my face, the same way they had 3 years ago, looking for cracks, weakness, proof I could be molded. You know, she said, voice softening, I had to learn these lessons too. Mark's father was a difficult man, demanding, but I learned how to support him, how to anticipate his needs, how to avoid conflict. By staying silent? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Linda's smile tightened, just for a second. Then it returned, colder than before. By being smart, she corrected. Smart wives know when to stay quiet, when to observe, when to trust that their husband knows best. I took a sip of tea to avoid responding. My phone pressed against my ribs, recording every word. Linda stood and walked to the window, looked out at her perfect lawn. You've been asking questions lately, haven't you? My stomach dropped. Questions? Mark mentioned you've been curious, going through things that don't concern you. I kept my voice steady. I don't know what you mean. Linda turned to face me. Her expression hadn't changed, but something in her posture had. Stiffer, guarded. You went into his office. It wasn't a question. I was looking for a pen, I lied. Were you? She walked back to the table, sat down slowly. Emily, I'm going to give you some advice. The kind of advice that could save you a lot of pain. Stop looking. Stop asking. Stop trying to understand things that are above your concern. Above my concern? I'm his wife. Exactly. Linda leaned forward. You're his wife, not his business partner, not his accountant, not his mother. You have a role. Stay in it. The threat was clear, wrapped in motherly wisdom, but a threat all the same. I nodded, played along. I just want things to go back to normal. Linda's smile returned. They will, once you learn, once you stop making everything so complicated. She checked her watch. We have until the 28th. That's when everything gets sorted out. After that, we can all move forward. The 28th. Yeah. 2 weeks away. What happens on the 28th? I asked carefully. Linda stood, picking up our glasses. Nothing you need to worry about. That's the point, dear. She moved to the sink, her back to me. Now, let's talk about how long you'll be staying here. I've prepared the guest room. I stared at her back, my pulse racing. The 28th. A deadline. The same deadline mentioned in the emails. Linda wasn't just controlling Mark. She was managing a timeline, a countdown to something catastrophic, and she'd just accidentally told me exactly when it would all come crashing down. I left Linda's house 2 hours later with a smile on my face and a recording in my pocket. She'd bought the act, the obedient daughter-in-law returning to learn her place. She even walked me to my car, reminding me to think about what we discussed. I drove back to Denver replaying her words. We have until the 28th. That's when everything gets sorted out, as if bankruptcy and debt collectors were just minor inconveniences, as if the Nevada plate sitting outside our townhouse were coincidence. The highway stretched ahead of me, mountains in the distance. I should have felt afraid. Instead, I felt clarity. For the first time in 4 years, I could see the whole picture. When I pulled into our neighborhood, the black SUV was there again. Same spot, same tinted windows, but this time the driver's door was open. A man stood beside it. Tall, dark suit, sunglasses even though the sun was setting. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was waiting. I parked in our driveway, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Watched him in my rearview mirror. He didn't move, just stood there, arms crossed, facing my car, making sure I saw him, making sure I knew. I grabbed my phone and got out slowly, kept my eyes on the front door, walked as calmly as I could even though every instinct screamed at me to run. Mrs. Reynolds. His voice cut through the evening air. Low, calm, the kind of calm that came from practice. I stopped, turned. He took off his sunglasses. His eyes were flat, professional. You should tell your husband we're done waiting. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. He slipped the sunglasses into his pocket. Your mother-in-law thinks she's clever, moving money, hiding assets. But we've been doing this a long time, Mrs. Reynolds. We know where everything is. My mouth went dry. I'm not involved in their business. That's not how it works. He tilted his head slightly. You married into this. You signed documents. You live in the house they bought with borrowed money. That makes you involved. I didn't know. They never do. He almost smiled. Almost. Tell Mark and Linda we'll be back on the 28th. If they don't have what they owe, we start liquidating. Starting with anything in your name. He got back into the SUV, started the engine, and drove away slowly, like he had all the time in the world. Because he did. I stood frozen in my driveway until his taillights disappeared. Then I ran inside, locked every door, and pulled every curtain closed. My laptop sat on the kitchen counter. I opened it with trembling fingers and logged into my email. Created a new folder. Started uploading every photo I'd taken from Mark's office, bank statements, loan documents, Linda's emails, wire transfers, the business card from Castellano Recovery Services. I sent copies to 3 different email addresses I created on the spot. Uploaded them to a cloud storage account Mark didn't know about. Printed physical copies and stuffed them into a folder I hid inside a box of tampons under the bathroom sink. The one place Mark would never look. If they were going to use me as a firewall, I was going to build my own. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then I thought about the man in the SUV, the deadline, the 28th. I answered. Emily? A woman's voice, professional, urgent. This is Sarah Campos. I'm an attorney with Morrison & Associates. I received your inquiry about prenuptial contract review. I'd contacted her 3 days ago, before the slap. Before the office. When I was still trying to understand why Mark had been acting strange. Yes, I said quietly, I need help. I've done some preliminary research based on what you told me, Emily, we need to meet. Tonight, if possible. Her voice dropped. Things are about to escalate very quickly. I closed my eyes. How quickly? You're married to a man who's about to lose everything. And when men like that panic, they don't think clearly. They make choices that put everyone around them at risk. Outside, I heard an engine, idling, waiting. The SUV was back. Sarah Campos met me at a coffee shop in Cherry Creek at 9 that night. She was younger than I expected. Mid-30s, sharp, blazer. The kind of woman who looked like she'd spent years learning how to dismantle men like Mark in courtrooms. Thank you for meeting me, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. She didn't waste time, pulled out a tablet and opened a file. I've reviewed the prenuptial agreement you sent me. Emily, do you understand what you signed? Protection for Mark's family assets if we divorce. That's what they told you. Sarah turned the tablet toward me. But read Clause 14, the liquidation provision. I scanned the dense legal language. Words like marital, debt, exclusion, and creditor liability firewall. I don't understand. It means, Sarah said, leaning forward, that if Mark or his family incur debt during your marriage, your personal assets are protected. They can't be seized. But you become legally untouchable. That sounds good? It would be, if it weren't fraud. She pulled up another document. Prenuptial agreements are designed to protect existing assets, not to shield future criminal activity. They structured this specifically to use you as a barrier between themselves and their creditors. My stomach turned. So, I'm complicit? No, you're a victim. Sarah's expression softened slightly. But here's where it gets interesting. The prenup includes a domestic violence clause. If Mark commits any act of physical harm against you, the entire agreement inverts. Every protection they built around themselves transfers to you. I stared at her. Meaning the $800,000 they tried to protect from you? It's now yours, along with any marital assets acquired during the marriage, the townhouse, his retirement accounts, everything. The room felt like it was spinning. Because he hit me. Because he committed domestic assault and violated the terms of a legal contract. Sarah closed her tablet. But there's more. The men watching your house, they're not just debt collectors. Castellano Recovery Services is under federal investigation. Money laundering, racketeering. They loan money to desperate people, then use threats and violence to collect. Your husband and his mother borrowed from organized crime, Emily. I couldn't breathe. And they think I know where the money is. Do you? No, but I have evidence of what they've been doing. Sarah's eyes sharpened. What kind of evidence? I pulled out my phone, showed her the photos, bank statements, emails, the wire transfers between Mark and Linda and companies with Nevada addresses. She studied each image carefully, then looked up at me with something close to admiration. Emily, this is enough to bury them and protect you, but we need to move fast. Why? Because desperate men do desperate things. She handed me a business card. This is a detective I work with, former financial crimes unit. I'm sending him everything you just showed me, tonight. My phone buzzed. Mark. Where are you? Then another text. We need to talk, now. He knows, I whispered. Sarah stood, gathering her things. Go home. Act normal. Don't let him know you've spoken to anyone. Can you do that? I nodded, even though every part of me wanted to run, to disappear, to be anywhere but that townhouse with a man who'd been raised, to see me as property. But running wouldn't save me. Evidence would. I drove home through empty Denver streets. The SUV was gone. That felt worse somehow, not knowing where they were, not knowing who was watching. Mark's car sat in the driveway, lights on in the house. I could see his shadow moving past the window, frantic, searching. I walked in to find every drawer in his office open, papers scattered across the floor. He spun around when he heard me, his face red and panicked. Where is it? He demanded. Where's what? The folder. The bank statements. I know you took them. I kept my voice calm. I didn't take anything, Mark. You're lying. He moved toward me, and I stepped back instinctively. My mother said you were at her house asking questions, recording her. My blood went cold. I wasn't. Don't. His voice cracked. Don't lie to me. We know what you're doing. We know you've been talking to lawyers. He grabbed my arm. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to scare. That's when I heard it. Sirens. Distant, but growing closer. Mark heard them too. His grip loosened. His face went white. The sirens grew louder. Closer. And then they stopped. Right outside. The knock came hard and official. Mark's hand dropped from my arm. He stood frozen, staring at the door like it might explode. Denver police. Open the door. Everything I'd been holding inside for 4 years crystallized in that moment. This was it. The collapse Linda had been trying to prevent. The reckoning Mark thought he could outrun. Don't answer it, Mark whispered. His voice shook. Emily, please. Don't answer it. I walked past him and opened the door. 2 officers stood on our porch. Behind them, 2 unmarked sedans. Behind those, the black SUV with Nevada plates. Mrs. Reynolds? The lead officer was older, gray temples, the kind of cop who'd seen everything twice. I'm Detective Morrison. We have a warrant to search the premises. Mark appeared behind me, forcing a smile. I'm sure there's been a mistake, officer. What's this about? Financial fraud? Money laundering? We'll need you to step outside while we conduct the search. Mark's face went pale. I want to call my lawyer. You're welcome to. From the porch. They moved past us like a choreographed unit. Within minutes, our home became a crime scene. Boxes carried out. Computers seized. Mark's office stripped bare. Mark paced the driveway, phone pressed to his ear, leaving frantic messages for lawyers who didn't answer at 10 at night. Detective Morrison approached me separately, gentle, strategic. Mrs. Reynolds, we're aware this may come as a shock to you, but we need to ask, have you noticed unusual financial activity? Large transfers? Cash withdrawals? I could have lied, protected Mark out of habit, out of fear. Instead, I told the truth. He's been hiding documents, loan papers from Nevada. His mother's involved too. They've been moving money for months. The detective's expression didn't change, but he wrote everything down. Do you have proof? I took photos, bank statements, emails, everything. Can you send those to me? I pulled out my phone, forwarded the entire folder, watched his phone light up with notification after notification. He looked up at me with something close to respect. Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. This helps more than you know. Mark didn't hear the conversation. He was too busy arguing with his mother on the phone, his voice rising with each sentence. They're at the house, Mom. They have a warrant. What do I tell them? I couldn't hear Linda's response, but I could imagine it. Stay calm. Deny everything. Protect the system. But the system was breaking. An hour later, Detective Morrison received a call, listened, nodded, hung up and walked straight to Mark. Mr. Reynolds, we need you to come down to the station for questioning. Am I under arrest? Not yet, but we strongly advise you cooperate. Mark looked at me then, really looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the moment he realized I'd betrayed him. That's what he thought. But what I'd actually done was refuse to drown with him. They led him to one of the unmarked cars. He didn't fight, didn't resist. He just kept staring at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I always had been. After they left, I stood alone in our ransacked home. Furniture moved, drawers emptied, the life we'd built reduced to evidence bags and case numbers. My phone buzzed. Sarah, Linda Reynolds just had police show up at her Colorado Springs residence. She's attempting to destroy documents. They've secured the scene. I sat down on the couch. The same couch where Mark had told me to move in with his mother, where he'd treated me like a problem to be solved, instead of a person to be loved. Linda was panicking, Mark was being questioned, and I was finally free to breathe. My laptop sat open on the coffee table. I pulled up the local news website. The headline was already breaking. Mother and son under investigation for multi-state financial fraud scheme. Below it, a photo of Linda's house. Police tape. Evidence boxes being carried out. I read the article twice. They'd connected the dots faster than I expected. The Nevada loans, the shell companies, the money laundering through Linda's real estate business. Everything was unraveling. And somewhere in Colorado Springs, Linda Reynolds was learning that control only works until someone decides to stop obeying. The courthouse in downtown Denver smelled like floor polish and old paper. I walked through the metal detectors carrying a single folder. Everything I needed to end this. Protection order forms, prenup documentation. The police report from the night Mark grabbed my arm. Sarah met me in the hallway outside family court. Ready? I nodded, more ready than I'd ever been. Inside, the judge reviewed our filings with the kind of careful attention that made me believe in the system again. She looked up at me over her reading glasses. Mrs. Reynolds, you're requesting a protection order against your husband and his mother? Yes, Your Honor. And you're claiming entitlement to the full prenuptial settlement based on domestic violence provisions? Yes, Your Honor. She looked back down at the documents, read in silence for what felt like hours. Mr. Reynolds has been charged with fraud and money laundering. His mother as well. You're listed as a potential witness in the criminal case. I am. And during your marriage, you were unaware of their financial crimes? Completely unaware, until 2 weeks ago. The judge made a note, looked at Sarah. Counselor, the evidence supports your client's claims. Protection order granted. Prenuptial settlement awarded in full. $800,000 plus marital asset division as outlined. $800,000. The number that was supposed to protect Mark's family from me was now mine. Every manipulation, every rule, every time Linda had corrected my posture or Mark had dismissed my questions, it all came down to this moment. Justice delivered in a courtroom that smelled like floor polish. We walked out into bright Colorado sunshine. Sarah handed me her card. The settlement will process within 30 days. Until then, stay away from both of them. The protection order is active immediately. What happens to them now? Linda's facing federal charges, multiple counts. She'll likely take a plea deal to avoid trial. Mark's looking at 3 to 5 years if convicted, maybe more depending on what else they uncover. I thought about Linda's perfect house in Colorado Springs, her lectures about being a good wife, her system of control that she'd spent decades perfecting, all of it collapsing because she'd underestimated the woman she tried to break. That afternoon, I moved into a small apartment in Capitol Hill. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, a view of the city instead of mountains. It was mine, truly mine. No one to tell me how to fold towels. No one monitoring my movements. No one training me to be smaller. My phone rang while I was unpacking. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then I thought about all the unknown numbers that had led me here. The warnings, the tips, the person who'd known what Mark and Linda were hiding. Hello? Emily, a man's voice, the same one from weeks ago. I saw the news. You did good. Who are you? Someone who owed money to the same people your husband did. Someone who got out before it was too late. He paused. I called because I hoped you'd be smart enough to do the same. Looks like you were. Why did you help me? Because no one helped my wife, and she paid for my mistakes. His voice cracked slightly. Don't let anyone make you pay for theirs. The line went dead. I stood in my empty apartment, phone in hand, thinking about Linda's final words to me. We have until the 28th. That's when everything gets sorted out. She'd been right. Everything did get sorted out on the 28th, just not the way she planned. That evening, the news showed footage of Linda being led out of a courthouse in handcuffs, her silver hair perfect, her cream pantsuit pressed. But her face showed something I'd never seen before. Fear. The next segment showed Mark being escorted from his downtown office building. Co-workers watching, phones recording. The public humiliation Linda had always warned him to avoid. I turned off the TV. Walked to my new window, looked out at the city lights spreading below. Somewhere out there, Linda Reynolds was learning that you can't control everything. That the women you try to break sometimes learn to fight back. That training someone to obey only works until they remember they have a choice. And Mark was learning that his mother's lessons had consequences. That violence and manipulation don't build marriages, they destroy them. That the person you underestimate is often the one who defeats you. I thought about the sound of his palm meeting my face, the echo that changed everything. If that slap had never happened, I might have stayed. Might have kept playing the role Linda wrote for me. Might have drowned alongside them when their empire collapsed. But it did happen, and it woke me up. Linda Reynolds taught her son how to trap me, how to control me, how to use me as a shield for their crimes. But in doing so, she accidentally taught me the most valuable lesson of all. She taught me exactly how to destroy them both.